Hello everybody and welcome to How to Blockchain. Today we're talking about blockchain training and I've got some very special friends along with me today to help break this one down. Melissa from Blockchain Training Alliance, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So let's get straight into it. I know that from a personal perspective, I get a whole bunch of different messages coming from people on social, from colleagues, from clients saying, I'm really interested in blockchain. I want to learn about blockchain. I want to work in blockchain. How can I get more information? How can I skill up? What's your answer to people who come to you with those sorts of questions? How do people get into blockchain training?
That's really a great question. I'm excited to talk about this one because it's one that I get pretty often. I get hundreds of emails and chats and calls every week wanting to cover this exact question. And students are really coming to us from every different background, and I would call it entry point. And I really break our learners or the people who are looking to get into blockchain into three groups. The first group is the technical group. This group, they know what blockchain is, they may have tinkered around with some code, and their business is talking about breaking into blockchain. So they're really looking at how can I learn more? How can I learn more about how to code in Hyperledger or Ethereum? And they're looking for something more formal to kind of guide them. So that group, it's pretty easy to direct because they have a pretty specific path that they're going down. They're developers. The second group that we get, I refer to as kind of our business group. They want to know how blockchain can, or maybe how blockchain can't, help their business. They're hearing blockchain be discussed within their organization, and they want to be in the loop, but they're not a technical group. They're just looking to get started on an overview of blockchain, maybe how to architect a blockchain solution. So that's kind of our non-technical audience. And then the third group we get, which is probably where most of the questions come from, is this is probably one of my favorite groups, and I just refer to them as the interested group. So this group is just interested in blockchain. They've heard it talked about it, at their business. They've seen it come up online. They're seeing the word blockchain come up again and again in the space of emerging tech. So this group of people comes to me from all different backgrounds. They may send an email that says, hey, I'm in marketing or I'm in accounting. Is there something specific that I could learn? And that's a group who's really just looking to learn more. They're looking to understand how blockchain could impact their vertical, what blockchain could mean for them. They're not really looking to code or develop a specific solution, but they want to know more. So I would say those are like the three main groups that are coming to myself and to BTA to look to understand more. They're looking for guidance on that path. And that path, we can help guide each one of those groups down kind of a specific path for training in order to get where they want to go.
My friends or my colleagues or my industry is talking about the blockchain, and I really must find a position on this, or I must understand how it relates to me. And I always find that it's a little bit, I don't know, it's a more complicated point than that, because you don't just learn blockchain and suddenly you get to transform. Actually, the topic of blockchain is more complex than that, right? It's actually about how are we changing industries or processes or the ways companies or governments do business.
Right.
Blockchain is one of the capabilities we use, but it's not just like you sprinkle a bit of blockchain suddenly and there you have transformation. There's a lot more context behind it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for that group that's really just interested in learning more about blockchain, you're not really learning about how does blockchain specifically impact accounting or marketing. You need to first understand blockchain as a concept as a whole. So we usually start people at the very beginning and then let them kind of go from there. But yeah, I would say those are the three groups that we get coming in and really looking to learn more about blockchain. And then there's my favorite people who know exactly what they want to do.
And what does that look like? What is the perfect, I know what I want, tell me how to get it conversation go with you?
They usually, I'd say a student will come and say, I'm an architect now. I'm an AWS architect. I'm an architect at my organization, and we've been tasked to build out a blockchain solution. I know that I need solution architecture, and they know exactly the path that they're going down and what they're looking to learn. So that's obviously a perfect student. But every student that wants to learn blockchain is really a perfect student, because you've got to sit down and put in the time to really learn the content and the ideas. So I would say any student who's willing to put in the time and effort is a great student in our book.
Brilliant. I love that. And that's actually a fascinating consideration there too, is it's not that everybody who wants to learn about blockchain is doing it in the anticipation of doing something with it in the future. It's actually that people are being challenged to work on projects right now. Organizations are using blockchain or deploying blockchain into their organizations, and their people need to skill up pretty quick. All right, and now over to a dear friend of mine, someone who I've been following and have had the pleasure to work with in a number of different contexts. It's Kris Bennett, the Blockchain Beard Guy. Kris, welcome along. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Always great having a conversation with another dear friend.
Very good. And we know each other obviously from working in the same industry, but also you were somebody who trained a number of my team when I was over at Deloitte. So I'm looking to you as the expert on what makes up a good blockchain curriculum. So I know there are a number of different components to this, and you're looking at technical and non-technical training as well. But for you and for the people out there who are looking to learn more about this space, what do you think makes up a great blockchain training curriculum?
Sure. Well, I'll kind of step back from that and just kind of frame my view of the question. I'm a big believer that in the world of technology, we have two kinds of advancements. We have technological evolutions where things just get better, faster, cheaper, more efficient. We have to get recertified on something, etc. And then once a generation or so, we have technological revolutions where something completely and totally new comes. And blockchain really kind of fits into the latter category, at least in my opinion. It's part of a group of technologies that we refer to as Web 3.0. So, Anthony, to get back to your question, what's a critical part of the curriculum? Whether technical or non-technical, I'm really a big believer in teaching the students that blockchain is not just a new technology, it's a new way to think. It's a new set of lenses to look at the world through. And blockchain puts a bunch of new tools in our toolbox. So when we go out and we look at all the problems in the world, whether that's in the private sector, public sector, whether it's in our personal life as consumers, we just have a lot more tools available. And it doesn't negate the value of the old tools or the conventional ones, but it just opens up a lot of new doors for us. So I think, again, whether it's technical or non-technical, we spend a lot of time really focusing on kind of that new way of thinking, because once you start to see the world through the blockchain lenses, and I'm sure, Anthony, you could tell a story about this, the rest kind of starts to fall into place and use cases start jumping out, and it makes the learning curve a lot easier after that point.
100%. Once you're aware of what collaboration models can look like, if you spent your entire career figuring out how do I innovate, or how do I improve, or how do I work on process modifications that just affect my company, my processes, what happens within my house, that's a perfect place for you to live. That's a perfect place for the thinking to exist. But when you start actually imagining, what does it look like if I crowdsourced innovation across a sector? The best innovation thinkers, Singularity University being one of them, start there saying, actually, how do you pull together the resources across multiple parties, not just one? Once you put those goggles on, and I'm not sure what blockchain goggles look like, but if I had a pair of those, I'd have them on 24/7. Once you think differently about how you curate transformation, you're absolutely right. Everything else suddenly starts to take a different perspective. You start being able to say, well, if these parties and these parties and these guys work together, and we were able to connect, and then we deployed this in this place to solve this problem, all we've got to do is now we've just got to call three companies who've never worked together, who don't know each other, whose three CEOs have their own agendas, and we can make something happen. But actually, that's how it works. That's my job. And genuinely, once you look at transformation in that way, there are much, much more possibilities that you can work with.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's fun watching so many students go through this transformative process where they come into the class, oftentimes a little nervous or feeling overwhelmed because they expect the technical learning curve to be extremely steep, and they wonder, "Am I in over my head? Boy, I haven't written any code since college, or I'm a heads down developer, but I've been working on different technologies. Is this too big of a learning curve?" And it's fun watching them over the course of a 3-day class or a 5-day class come to this realization that, oh, the technology is relatively simple. All this is still so new. There just hasn't been a lot of time for complexity. But the things, Anthony, you're talking about, boy, how do you get executives and stakeholders from different organizations into the same room to agree on a common set of definitions on process and what matters? That's the sticky part. And that's where we need not just a lot of good architects and developers and technical folks, but strong program managers, product managers, engagement managers, open-minded executives to see the possibilities. Really a wide range of skills right now that we need to bring blockchain forward into the world.
Yeah, and this is sort of my point, is if all you learned was the mechanics of how the Bitcoin blockchain works, you would probably go back to your organization and say, I feel really smart about having a dinner party conversation around Bitcoin now, but I have literally no idea what to do with this, for my company or for the organization I work for, other than maybe time stamping something if I really wanted to. And there's so much more potential to that. So as we're crafting our perfect curriculum, I think you can't not include, at least for some of those who are more business than technical, a component of thinking about how do you crowdsource innovation? Or how do you bring multiple parties together? Or what are some of the examples of consortia that have spun up because they were suddenly able to work together with a collaborative technology?
It's a fascinating area for me because I think you have some folks in technology who are just fascinated by the technology. I'm a little bit different. I enjoy the technology because to me it's kind of an insight into human beings and how they think and psychology. And blockchain and these decentralized technologies are really interesting because they're kind of these tools that pick up where conventional technology fails, not for technical reasons, but for human reasons, because if I own the database and I have all the control and I say you can believe me because it comes from my database that nobody else can have access to, oftentimes that doesn't work. And that's for purely non-technical reasons. So I would just kind of encourage anybody, if you're on the outside looking in and you're kind of interested in this intersection between technology and human behavior, this is a really fascinating area of study.
If it isn't for FOMO, it's for philanthropic reasons or for understanding how does human psychology play out in business. And actually, if you want to go and do any more reading on that topic, Alison McCauley is the perfect person to go follow, because this is exactly what she spent 2 university degrees worth of studying human and organizational behavior to then be able to apply it into blockchain, which I think is fascinating. But we're not here to talk about that, Kris. Let's run it down. Let's do the top 5, the top 10, whatever hits the curriculum list. Let's start with technical. Because reasons. What are the things that you would want to make sure that someone's learning from a technical perspective around blockchain?
From just a technical nuts and bolts perspective, I would say the first thing you really have to wrap your head around is, if you're like me, if you got a little bit of gray and you've been doing this for a while, the first thing you're going to have to do is unlearn a lot. Things like inefficiency. Somehow being something bad or something we want to purge from our organizations. Not falling into the trap of thinking about things in a client-server model. Again, if you're like me and you've been working in that model for a few decades now, that's a very, very tough habit to break. But in general, if you're up to date on your web technologies, if you're comfortable in languages like JavaScript, especially if you've done any kind of work in distributed systems, distributed databases like Mongo, familiar with containerization. All this is going to help you, but really there are very, very few technical prerequisites. As long as you've got a good appetite for adventure and you're not afraid of writing a little code and your Google skills are strong, you're going to do just fine. Again, like I said earlier, all of this is so new that the technology just hasn't had enough time to become that complex. So compared to learning other technical areas, it's actually remarkably simple.
Obviously, the more time we spend, there are probably a number of different blockchain protocols or platforms or places or even accelerators that you can go to. But I'm pretty sure that there's probably a staple in terms of the platforms that you probably see more commonly. Across the different blockchain protocols or platforms, what are the ones that your students most commonly ask for, the ones that you think you see more of out there in the world?
Yeah, great question. So I'll preface this by saying that the future is wide open. And if you'd asked me this question a few decades back, what's the best search engine, we might have a lively discussion about whether that was Lycos or Alta Vista, two names that we don't hear about anymore. But the two real big names in the blockchain space right now are Ethereum and Hyperledger. And you might be thinking to yourself, hey, what about Bitcoin? I'm always hearing about Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin is one we certainly hear a lot about, but Bitcoin's a bit limited. You can't really build any applications on top of it like you can this new wave of blockchain platforms. So we tend to see folks coming into the Ethereum side of things, generally speaking, if they're more interested in the consumer side of blockchain. Hyperledger is really for those interested in more of the business or enterprise side of blockchain. And they're both great places to start if you have a preference towards one side of the market or the other. If you're just kind of up in the air, hey, I just want to plant a flag and start somewhere and get my feet wet, I always recommend Ethereum. It's a little bit simpler than Hyperledger, a little bit easier to get your feet wet and learn some of the basics, and can be a great jumping off point if you want to go a little bit further. But of course, the space is evolving rapidly, and this conversation may not age too well. And in a year, there may be something brand new we've never heard of that's taken the world by storm.
Exactly, and that's the exciting part, right? At this point in time, I suspect this video probably has a window of relevance of 12 months. If we make it to 18, I'll be delighted. But really, it's more just about helping people understand where to look and what to look for. And so obviously, there's a couple of different platforms. For a technical student, if they spend 3 days in a box or a virtual box, I guess these days with yourself, Kris, what are you hoping they're going to come out with after 3 days? What are the skills or the case studies or the work that they will have done, to get them up to speed or up and running at least?
Yeah, great question. So it's a 3 to 5 day course, most of what we teach. And as you know, Anthony, you can take even just a small part of blockchain and blow it out into a semester long deep dive. So I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression. You are not going to come out of this as an expert or knowing everything. But I always tell students that I have two goals during any of the courses that we run. And I ask at all times that they keep me on track with these two goals. Number one is if you're going to spend that amount of time around me, you have to walk away having learned something. If you spend all that time with me, it's very painful. You've learned nothing. I've really, really failed you as a teacher. But secondly, and more importantly, whatever you walk away with, whatever new knowledge you have, has to be actionable. It has to help you take whatever that next step is in your blockchain journey. So if we spend 3 days together, 5 days together in a class, and you learn a lot, but it's just kind of information that you can go home and share around the dinner table or with your friends on the weekends, that's still a failure. I want to make sure that whatever that next step is, we've really, really enabled you for success. So those are our goals, and we try with every student we can to make sure that we've hit both of them.
Very good. And it's not unheard of that you'll find non-technical or non-developer or non-architect colleagues that I've seen have gone on to have time or spend time on technical courses who are the type of person that want to understand what's under the hood rather than just how the car works. And at the same time, you'll have architects who will go on to say, actually, a big part of my job is helping to convene networks, or to bring people together. So I'm not saying that there is any kind of exclusivity between which path you choose and you couldn't step one way or another, but it's really interesting for me just to kind of understand technically what are the basic concepts that people want to study. If it's around decentralization, if it's around the different nuances of coding or deploying Ethereum or Hyperledger or other platforms. I mean, obviously that's super important. Ultimately, you want to have an understanding between what's the base code, what's the architecture, how do you deploy it, can you integrate it with other things, can you integrate it with enterprise systems if that's where you want to go to, launching a token, being able to manage wallets. I don't expect within 3 to 5 days you go anywhere near hardware security modules, and please don't go there until you absolutely have to, because it is the bane of most projects. But that's a good start. On the non-technical side, if I may say, we talked already about having an appreciation for digital transformation or for some of the concepts around what decentralization can bring, some of the case studies around the types of consortia or business networks that exist. What would be, alongside those things, in your top 3-5 things that you would want a business or non-technical person to cover over 3 to 5 days?
For someone more on the business side, again, it's important in my mind for both the technical and non-technical students to walk away with those new lenses, to really start to see the value of the technology and where to apply it. But with the more business-focused students in the less technical classes, we really dive down a lot deeper into that. So if you're kind of wondering about blockchain more from an enterprise standpoint, you've probably found that there are a lot of great resources out there that will break down the different platforms and the benefits and those sorts of things. But it can be really tough just to get to that point, just to understand, hey, this use case that I've got in the business or this pain point that we're feeling, is this something that could be addressed with blockchain, or is this a different type of problem? So we spend a lot of time in the non-technical courses really talking about use case analysis and scorecarding. What are some of the patterns that you want to look for? What are some of those red flags that tell you, hey, I've got to budget a little extra time to investigate blockchain and see whether it's a good fit. And then maybe more importantly, once you find a good use case, there are very, very few, if any, blockchain projects, especially in the enterprise space, that exist in a vacuum. You're very often getting together with other participants in your business network and trying to sell them on the vision. And as anybody who's worked in solution design will tell you, or anybody who's done any business analysis work, if you get 10 different stakeholders into a room and ask them about a business process they're all a part of, you get anywhere from 20 to 30 different descriptions. So a lot of time is just spent kind of talking through the mechanics of what does an actual project look like? What does an implementation look like? What are the deltas between the kind of IT implementation you're used to and what you can expect with blockchain? Because some things are the same and some things are radically different. So just trying to level set and set expectations properly and let the non-technical students understand the environment that they're starting to wade into if they choose to go further.
That's super good. And there's a couple of things I've picked up on there that have definitely been really useful to me. The first thing is getting an appreciation for what are some of the characteristics of where blockchain technology can be used, because I think it's really important. And this is important when you get to those multi-party conversations, is if you haven't got a relatively clear view that this is likely to be a technology that's going to be more effective, more risk-free, easier to scale, versus alternatives, versus having a centralized utility with a bunch of people standing around a database, or whether it's cheaper to do it with an Excel sheet and a credit card, right? Whether this is an over sophistication of the technology for something that actually is very, very simple to solve, or that actually the value behind doing it is so low that the amount of effort, time, orchestration just really isn't worth spending the time investing in building technology. Being able to have a really good commercial story, a commercial case behind why this technology, why this investment, why these parties, and what are we going to get out the other end, is critical. And that's really just, and it kind of applies to any technology, is that you're able to at least construct a business case appropriately, and you're able to understand where blockchain does make sense and where it doesn't.
So absolutely. And, one of the great things is we get people from so many different disciplines approaching these problems from so many different industries, verticals, points of view, organization size. And it's really interesting in these classes to watch that at the end of the day, so many of them are talking about exactly the same business problem. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about blockchain and these decentralized technologies is you get people from vastly different businesses or verticals together. You start having conversations about blockchain problems and solutions, and you find out at the end of the day, for all their differences, you're solving exactly the same business problem. And that really engenders a lot of interesting conversations, because if you're in a room with folks you don't compete with, who are in a very, very different segment of the market, you're oftentimes a little bit more willing to share and open up and talk about what's going on in your organization. And that just makes for some very, very insightful conversations and a lot of lessons shared, knowledge passed around in those conversations that frankly has nothing to do with blockchain or the project. Just kind of seeing a similar problem from a different point of view.
Gotcha, 100%. And a lot of the mundane business specific problems in finance, in procurement and supply chain are analogous across the different pieces. At the same time, actually getting people from different industries to compare ideas on how they do different things, I think is hugely valuable. And I would love to be on a fly on the wall in some of those classes when you're starting to get all of the different perspectives and all of the different energy and all of the different excitement. It's like, oh, right, I've learned a whole bunch of new stuff about blockchain now. This is what we're going to take back to the company when we get home. Melissa, welcome back. For the next segment, we talked a little bit about the ideal student or the common types of student that you get as you're looking to give them training. But what I really want to double click on for a second is, what are the types of organizations that are asking for training, or where are these people coming from? Because what I can observe is that there's a number of different organizations interested or already working with the technology, but obviously you're seeing a lot more students than I am. From what type of organizations are the students coming from?
That's a great question. So organizations come to BTA really in two ways. We have individual learners and then team trainings, which are enterprise engagements. For individual learners, I would say there's not many companies or government enterprises around the world that we haven't trained. So individual learners are coming to us really from every type of organization. All the big companies have at least a few learners that are coming, whether they're just looking to learn on their own, or they'd be giving a training budget of some kind and it's something they want to explore, or it's something that their company is starting to invest in. But for team training, where we're coming on site, well, with COVID, we're doing everything virtually now. We have trained a lot of different organizations, and Kris might be able to elaborate on some of the use cases and interesting things that the companies are doing that we've trained. So some of the companies we've trained, and one you're very familiar with, is Deloitte. So Deloitte, as you know, has a huge consulting staff that needs to go out and be able to speak intelligently and find solutions around blockchain. So Deloitte has done a number of training engagements globally with our organization. We've worked with the airlines. Air France specifically has done several training engagements with BTA. Banking, including Citigroup. And a lot of different government organizations have worked with BTA. So we've trained here in the States, the United States Trade and Patent Office, which I think was a really interesting training in their use case. The US Citizen and Immigration Department, we did some training for. Dubai Customs, and then we jump into medical. And in the medical group, we've done training for Merck. That we've gone out and done several trainings for them. And again, Kris can kind of speak to their use cases and what they're looking to do there. And some of our upcoming training engagements that we're going to be working on, we'll be working with Overstock, that have a number of students that they need to get trained and to be on the same page with where they're going with their with blockchain.
It's not necessarily surprising to me, but it's also very impressive that you guys have managed to cover the entire world. And I'm sure Kris will have clocked up a fair few air miles before he's been
Yes.
grounded with COVID. But actually, your point is a really important one. Is not necessarily that that number of companies, but it's that there are enough companies now doing projects in different sectors and are exploring it such that they want to build the capability internally. Is that there is enough demand or realization that this is a technology we need to work with. Not that it's a luxury or that it's something that we're doing on the side with externals for fun, but actually these are core skills that we need to develop as an organization, which I think is an important transition or an important place to recognize that we're at.
Yeah.
Kris, I'm going to bring you in for a second. Welcome back. Kris, obviously, as you're going through the training, maybe some of the guys are talking specifically about the types of projects that they're running. And I don't want to breach any confidentiality or talk about any trade secrets out there. But generally speaking, what are some of the use cases or the types of blockchain programs that your clients or the people you're training are looking at right now?
Yeah, great question. I think, if you look at all the organizations that Melissa listed off and all the organizations we work with and all the use cases they're tackling, there's this common thread that runs through all of them. And that is, we are trying to solution a problem that is bigger than just our organization. We are trying to work with other partners, other organizations in our business network. We've got some common goals that we're trying to achieve. And having one participant in that ecosystem that gets to own and control all the infrastructure can oftentimes be problematic. We talk all the time about blockchain being part of this Web 3.0 revolution, but oftentimes, what Web 3.0 is doesn't get talked about a lot. So, we had Web 1.0, the original internet, and this was the decentralization of publishing. Now, if I have something I want to share, I can share it with the whole world. I don't have to go through traditional centralized publishing centers. Web 2, social media came along, and this is the decentralization of communication. As you know, our president spends an inordinate amount of time on Twitter. And now if he says something and I want to say something back, I can't. Doesn't mean he's going to read it or respond or care, but it really opened up communications. And now anybody on earth can directly communicate with anybody else. So Web 3.0 is all about this decentralization of infrastructure, of all the hardware that makes the internet work. And so, not to say that a business has to be on blockchain, that it's a requirement, just like you don't have to have a corporate web presence. You don't have to have a social media presence, but in 2020, to not have these things is really making a conscious choice to give up a very big advantage. And I think over the coming years, we're going to see blockchain start to fall into that. So to kind of get back to your original question, Anthony, we see a lot of these organizations really solving the same problems and understanding, hey, there are a lot of cool things we can do together if we all have some skin in the game. And it's not just me owning all the infrastructure and being kind enough to share it with you, or vice versa.
Very good. And I guess the kind of common areas of problems, again, picking on a little bit of my experience, supply chain management and logistics are pretty common because you've got multiple parties. Finance and procurement, as little press as they get, as areas where you've got multiple parties or many-to-many relationships. The simple challenge around onboarding suppliers or dispute resolution around invoicing or contingent workers, third-party workers, management of large contracts and projects. As unsexy as these things are and as unlikely as they are to make the tabloids, if you're looking at large organizations or very large supply bases, there's a huge amount, oftentimes hundreds of millions of dollars, of waste or inefficiency or just unnecessary cost, which if we'd architected things differently, not saying it has to be blockchain, but looking at blockchain as inspiration, if we architect differently, there's a whole bunch of value to be gained. And so if your business has finance or procurement or a supply chain, chances are it's worth looking at. So that's awesome. And thank you for weighing in on that, Kris. Now we're going to go through a couple of examples of people who've been through the journey of looking for and receiving blockchain training. Let's go check it out.
Hello, my name is Randall, and I've just completed the Blockchain Overview Business Fundamentals course from Blockchain Training Alliance. It has certainly been one of the better online courses I've done. It has met my objectives very clearly. I certainly recommend this course to anybody who wants to learn about blockchain, regardless of whether you have a background or not, technical or otherwise. I see this blockchain is certainly has a huge potential in the coming few years to transform the financial services industry in particular.
This is Said Ikramuddin. I just completed the blockchain found overview for business course. The way this course organized, it's very wonderful to me because it's repeated the important things in multiple chapters, so that someone complete the course will aware of the most important things they should know from blockchain space.
Hi, I'm Vishal and I've just completed my course on Blockchain Overview, Business Foundations. The course on Blockchain Overview has explained the concept in simple language, and now I can visualize how I may use Ethereum and other business cases for further development of my ideas.
I like to thank you, Blockchain Training Alliance, to make this course.
Thanks for your help. I'll definitely recommend this course to other like-minded people.
Indeed, thank you, Blockchain Training Alliance, and I look forward to my next course.
All right. I want to give a massive thank you to Kris and Melissa for coming on the show today and for sharing a little bit of their experience. Melissa, Kris, where can guys find out more about what you guys are doing and how can they connect?
Yeah, absolutely. For myself, you can find me on LinkedIn under Melissa Richardson. Feel free to shoot me a message, connect with me on there. I love hearing what people are doing or looking at learning in the blockchain space. So that's a great place to reach out to me. If you're looking for more information on the classes, you could just go to our website, which is Blockchain Training Alliance. Those are probably the two best ways to connect to myself and to receive information on the training that we talked about here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. Kris, how can people find out more about what you're up to?
Well, like Melissa said, you can find me on LinkedIn as well, BlockchainBeardGuy, ugliest guy in the business, so kind of hard to miss. If you're interested in blockchain, if you kind of want to take this conversation to the next level or just explore a little bit deeper, I don't want anyone to get the impression that you have to know exactly what you want before you come to Blockchain Training Alliance. So please reach out to us through the website, blockchaintrainingalliance.com. We're always happy to set up a time to chat, talk about your use case or where your organization is at and what might be the right path for you. We're always available. We just want to make sure you guys are successful in your blockchain journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. And if you haven't checked it out as well, Kris's vlog, The Beardcast and The Beardmobile, where he talks about all things blockchain that he's been interested in or that he's been learning about over the course of a week, which is probably more informal training content than it is formal training content, but is actually a whole bunch of stuff that I started following and getting learnings from when I started working in blockchain, even before I had any sort of formal role or title. So do connect to Kris, do check out his videos. Full disclosure, this was not a paid or advertised show. This is just me trying to contribute with some people who I love in the business around understanding what it's like to train on blockchain. As Melissa said, and as I get regularly communication or messages from people saying, how can I find out more? How can I learn more? And usually I direct people towards Melissa and Kris because that's what they're doing. That's the business that they're in. And I just wanted to get a chance to put out a show where you guys can learn a little bit more about what training looks like, what the journeys of people who've been training it feels like and looks like in the real world, and some people who you can learn a bunch from. So Kris, Melissa, thank you so much for joining the show, and I'll see you guys soon.